The creation of artistic material has been an important part of human civilizations for thousands of years. The arts enhance our quality of life and have been used to communicate important information and ideas throughout the ages. The arts take many forms, and each involves their own materials and techniques. But artists beware. Although many art materials are formulated to minimize the risk to artists, and techniques have evolved that minimize the potential for injuries, serious injuries and illnesses still occur. It is essential that each artist understand the risks associated with the materials and processes he or she uses, and the techniques available to control these risks. To work safely in the arts, follow these 6 steps. Know your materials. Know your process. Prepare for emergencies. Wear your personal protective equipment. Work safely. And clean up and wash up. We will now explore each of these steps in detail.
I really don't know where to look for information on the hazards of the materials that I'm working with.
The best way to learn about the hazards of the materials you are using is to read the product's label and the manufacturer's material safety data sheet. The labels on art supplies contain general information about the product's hazardous properties and limited information on how to properly handle the material. You might also see one or more seals on the label. The Art and Creative Materials Institute evaluates the safety of many art materials, and a manufacturer can place one of the following seals on its label if it meets the criteria. Whenever possible, use a product that has the non-toxic rating. If you are using a toxic material, additional precautions should be taken. You can also learn more about an art material by reviewing the manufacturer's Material Safety Data Sheet, sometimes called an MSDS. These sheets provide a lot more detailed health and safety information than is available on the label. Become familiar with the information found on the MSDSs of the materials you are handling. And if you have any questions about these materials, ask your instructor, department technician, or get in touch with your environmental, health, and safety department. Information found on MSDSs include a list of the product's hazardous ingredients and hazardous properties, precautions for the safe handling, storage, and use of the product, and emergency procedures. Many studios create binders of these sheets and place them in central locations so all students, faculty, and staff will have easy access to the information. You will also find material safety data sheets online. Take the time to find out where your studio sheets are kept so you can access them quickly when you need them.
Now that I know where to look for the information about the materials, what can they do to me?
Art materials may have a variety of hazardous properties, but most fall into 3 general categories: poisons, irritants and corrosives, and flammable and combustible materials. Poisonous art materials are those that can make you ill if a large enough dose enters your body. Some adverse health effects from poisonous materials may be felt immediately, while others are more insidious and may occur only after many months or even years after the exposure. Those that occur years later, like cancer, are often irreversible and usually very serious. Some materials, such as this lead-containing glaze, are poisonous in very small amounts, while others, such as this inert chalk, must be consumed in great quantities to have any effect at all. Examples of poisonous materials used in the arts include the heavy metals found in some paints and glazes, some printing solvents, and silica dust. Try to minimize your contact with all art materials, but when handling moderately or highly toxic materials, you must take additional precautions to keep these materials from entering your body by inhalation, ingestion, or contact with the skin. Corrosive and irritant compounds make up a second category of hazardous materials found in the arts. These materials can cause irritation or burns to body surfaces, but the eyes are particularly sensitive. Photographic solutions and plaster dust are examples of irritants. The acids used in printmaking, nitric, hydrochloric, and ferric chloride, are examples of corrosive materials used in the arts. Special personal protective equipment must be worn when handling these materials. Flammable and combustible materials make up a third category of hazardous art materials. Many cleaning solvents, such as those used in printmaking, as well as wood finishes, paints, and thinners, are flammable. Flammable solvents can easily be ignited at room temperature if a source of ignition is present, and can quickly spread a fire. Flammable vapors emitted from an open container or from a spill can travel to a distant ignition source, such as a fan motor, and flash back. Always work with flammable solvents away from potential sources of ignition, and always work with them with adequate ventilation, such as in or close to a hood. And of course, never smoke around flammable solvents. Combustible solvents, such as mineral spirits, although not as easily ignitable, will burn intensely if involved in a fire.
Are the materials I work with the only hazards I have to worry about?
No, a second set of art hazards has nothing to do with the materials handled, but are related to the processes, tools, or the techniques used in the creation of art. Let's look at a few examples. Welding is a common metalworking process. During the welding process, metal is vaporized and condenses in the air as fume. Inhaling some metal fumes can lead to metal fume fever and other illnesses. You must be aware of the metals coated on or present in the materials welded, and use ventilation or wear a respirator if necessary. Ultraviolet light and infrared radiation is also emitted. Without this face shield and shaded goggles, the welder would suffer eye damage from this radiation. The hot particles emitted while welding can also cause severe burns to unprotected skin. With an adequate understanding of these process hazards, the welder can protect herself. Another common process hazard is noise. Prolonged exposure to high noise sources can result in permanent hearing loss, usually many years after the exposure. If you must raise your voice to be heard by someone a few feet away, your noise exposure is excessive, and you should be wearing hearing protection. You should also be aware of the effect of impact noise on hearing loss. Impact noise can cause a high level of hearing loss because the ear cannot adapt to the noise, shutting some of it out, as it can with continuous noise. Be sure to wear your hearing protection when using impact tools and working around noisy machinery. The tools we use can also lead to accidents and injuries. Each hand or power tool will have its own set of safety practices that must be followed when using it. Pay attention when these are explained to you or seek out this information. Never use a tool that you do not know how to use safely, and only use a tool for its intended purpose. Severe injuries have occurred from misuse of power tools. Always inspect tools and equipment for any damage prior to using them. Make sure all cutting tools are clean, sharp, and cut freely. Many accidents occur when cutting tools have gotten dull and must be forced. When using hand carving tools, keep your hands behind the tool and cut away from your body. Of particular importance is understanding the proper use of guards. Each piece of power equipment will have their cutting surfaces guarded. These guards prevent you from coming into contact with the cutting tool. Never remove or bypass a guard or safety device. And don't wear loose clothing, work gloves, bracelets, or other jewelry that could become entangled in moving parts. And if you have long hair, tie it back. It takes a lot of concentration to operate power equipment. Never distract or startle an operator of power equipment. And fooling around is definitely prohibited in the studio. To learn more about the process-related hazards for the procedures you use, refer to the equipment manufacturer's literature, talk to your instructor, or review an ART safety reference. Emergencies occasionally occur in art studios, and you must be prepared to act quickly. If you should witness an accident or injury, phone for assistance immediately, and then assist if you can do so without placing yourself at risk. Find out where the closest eye wash and safety showers are located, and learn how to use them. You should also know where the closest fire extinguisher, spill kit, and building fire alarm are located. The studio phone should have emergency phone numbers posted close by. And if you are using electrical equipment or machinery, you should know where the emergency shutoffs are located in case the equipment must be turned off in a hurry. And of course, never obstruct access to emergency equipment or the hallway serving as emergency evacuation routes from the building. Although we try and eliminate the need for personal protective equipment, such as gloves, goggles, or a face shield, by using safer products, working in a well-ventilated environment, or behind a barrier, all artists will occasionally have to wear personal protective equipment. Wearing personal protective equipment adds a barrier to your body and can protect you if the equipment is selected and worn properly. Each type of personal protective equipment is designed to protect a particular part of the body against a particular hazard. Protect your hearing with earplugs or ear muffs. Protect your body, face, and eyes from chemical splashes with impermeable gloves, an apron, goggles, and a face shield. Protect your respiratory system with a respirator. And protect your skin and eyes from burns and infrared radiation by wearing leather gloves, a jacket, and eye shades of the proper rating. The type of personal protective equipment you should wear will vary based on the task performed. Some tasks require very little or no personal protective equipment, while others require a great deal. It is essential that you know what type of personal protective equipment to wear with each task you perform, as well as the limitations of that equipment. Your school or institution will have procedures that specify how you should handle hazardous materials and operate the different pieces of equipment that is used when creating art. Become familiar with these procedures and ask questions if you do not understand them. These procedures have been selected to protect you from the hazards of the materials and processes you are using. Let's look at a few common safety practices followed in the arts. When working with toxic, flammable, and even some irritants, it is common to capture and remove these materials from your work area by working in, under, or close to a hood connected to a ducted or local exhaust system. These systems work by drawing the hazardous material away from you and exhausting it safely outside. The hoods from these systems come in a variety of sizes and shapes, and each has limitations. When using local exhaust ventilation, check to make sure the ventilation system is running before you start, and work well inside or as close to the draw of the hood as possible. When local exhaust ventilation is not available, general ventilation can be utilized for controlling exposures to low or moderately toxic materials. General ventilation works by stirring up the air, diluting the contaminant. If you are using general ventilation, make sure that the flow of air directs the contaminants away from you and not at you. And how about those containers? Is that really what you should be using? I don't think so. Proper container management is very important. When transferring materials to other containers, make sure the new containers are in good condition and labeled with the name of the contents along with the hazards associated with the product. Never put chemicals in breakable containers, food containers, or containers with loose-fitting lids. Corrosive materials, such as these acids, should be stored in low cabinets close to where they will be used. Significant injury can occur if a corrosive material is dropped from a high shelf, breaks, and splashes. Always store flammable solvents in a flammable storage cabinet or in secondary containers designed for them. Rags contaminated with flammable solvents should be thrown into sealed waste bins and not out with the normal trash. And be aware that some oils, such as this finishing oil, can spontaneously ignite when left exposed to the air, and therefore must be placed in special water-filled containers. We all spend long hours in the studio, and it's often considered a nuisance to wash and leave the studio to get something to eat or drink. But eating and drinking in the studio is the most common source of exposure to some hazardous materials, particularly metals like lead. For example, a small amount of lead is transferred from the blocks to the hands while assembling this type. This lead can easily be transferred from the hands to food, the top of a cup, or any other object placed in the mouth. Never eat, drink, or smoke in the studio. Eating and drinking in the studio has led to toxic exposures, particularly to heavy metals, in artists working with paints, ceramic glazes, and other heavy metal-containing materials. If you need to eat or drink, take a break, wash your hands, and eat or drink in designated areas outside the studio. Back injuries occur when lifting heavy objects such as these bags of sand and lithographic stones. When you must move a heavy object, save your back by using a lift or some other mechanical device. If you must lift a heavy object, follow the technique illustrated here. Bend at your knees, keeping your feet close to the load. Keep your back straight and head up, and lift with your knees. Lifting with your back and twisting while lifting, as illustrated here, places a much higher load on your lower back and can lead to severe injuries. Some artists use repetitive motions in their work. Repetitive motion, particularly of the hands, wrist, and arms, can lead to painful inflammation of muscles, tendons, and nerves over time. If you use repetitive motions in your work, break up your work period with frequent rest breaks, and perform stretching exercises to relax repetitively used muscle groups. Although the creation of art is often a solitary experience, working alone in the studio with hazardous materials or techniques is unwise. When working in the studio, make sure someone is close by so they can help you if you should have an accident and require assistance. You might also have them come and check up on you from time to time. Proper housekeeping is the most frequently overlooked step in maintaining a safe studio environment, but contributes to many accidents. Make sure all your materials are labeled and return them to the proper storage area when you are finished with them. Store all your tools and supplies in a safe and orderly manner. Clean up any spills quickly. Sweep or vacuum up debris at the end of each session and regularly around power equipment to prevent slips. In some areas, such as ceramics or sculpture, where silica-containing dusts or other toxic materials may be present in the dust, you will have to wet mop or use a vacuum fitted with a high-efficiency particulate filter. Finally, you must always practice good personal hygiene by washing your hands and arms thoroughly when finished working, especially after working with toxic materials. Never wash your hands in a solvent. Many solvents are absorbed directly through the skin and are toxic. When you are ready to leave the studio, hang up your smock or studio clothes in the studio so contaminants will not be brought home with you. And when you are washing this clothing, wash them separately from your other clothing. Creating art can be fun and enriches all of our lives, but it can adversely affect your health if you do not understand the risks associated with the materials you use or the techniques you follow. Make the decision to behave safely in the studio by taking the time to learn about the materials you handle every day, making sure you know how to perform a task before proceeding, preparing for emergencies before they happen, wearing the personal protective equipment required for each task and working safely, and always cleaning up after yourself and washing thoroughly before leaving the studio. Enrich all of our lives and preserve your own by creating art safely.